Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing isn't
So some
there,
readers love that, and some readers are like, but I wanted more of this. So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I'm delighted to be joined by literary agent Ciara Finan. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for coming along. With agents, I like to kind of start at the sort of origin of their publishing journey, because I think it's always interesting to hear how people get into this kind of role. And I think it's a role that I have found a lot of people who know are interested in, but a lot of people don't really know what an agent is, what it entails, that kind of thing, and they kind of fall into it, and then they're like, oh, this is what I always wanted to do. So from my online sleuthing, am I right in thinking that your entry into publishing started with an internship in the books department of Curtis Brown in 2018?
That is correct, yes. I mean, after doing a master's in publishing, I was trying to get a publishing internship or job in Ireland. And those were the days of like unpaid internships, which also just wasn't necessarily feasible for me. So I applied for this internship at Curtis Brown and got it miraculously. And then 2 months later, I moved over to London. And
Wow.
Yeah, I was an intern here, I think maybe like for 6 weeks, and an assistant job came up working with Johnny Geller and Sheila Crowley. And I got that very luckily. And yeah, the rest is history. I then kind of was an assistant in Johnny's office for about 4 years before becoming an associate agent, where I started to take on my own authors. And then since then, was promoted to kind of agent earlier this year. And here I am. Yeah, and I've been so lucky to work with some incredible authors, both on kind of Johnny and Sheila's lists, which I learned so much from, and now kind of like carving out my own list and working with some fabulously talented people.
Yeah, okay. So you mentioned that you did a master's in publishing.
Yes. So I did an undergrad in English and law, and I'm pretty sure my parents at the time would have preferred if I had become a solicitor. But also like going to like law school after would have been quite expensive. So I thought, what else do I like doing? I've always loved reading and writing. And yeah, the kind of master's in publishing was actually at the university I was at anyway. So kind of delayed the inevitable adult life for an extra year, luckily, and did that. And then we had one talk from a literary agent. So I didn't really know what literary agents were before that. And I think like most people who kind of think about going into publishing, I presumed I would be like an editor editing literary fiction. And then once I actually was working, as an intern here and getting to see the kind of length and breadth of like, the different genres, but also like the publication process. I love reading literary fiction. I don't think I would be a particularly good agent for it. And also kind of being on the agent side, it was just great. Like I think I kind of toyed with the idea of maybe kind of moving across to the publishing side. But I'm so grateful that I did stay here, because I think it's so wonderful to kind of be at the very start of the process and like find or kind of having great authors come to me working editorially, on the manuscript, obviously, ideally getting a great deal for them, telling them that. Anyways, I genuinely feel like sometimes I can't believe I've kind of ended up here. Like if I think back to like 16-year-old me reading like fantasy books in my kind of after school study when I was supposed to be doing my homework, I think she'd be pretty happy.
Yeah. I mean, when I speak to different people around publishing, I think agent is the one where people, I mean, and I don't want to sell it short. It can be a very busy and intense job. It can be, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts. But I think people, when they find the balance, when things are going well, just seem so happy to be literary agents.
Yeah, definitely. And I think specifically for me, I kind of became an associate agent at a time when, romantasy started to kind of kick off and like book talk. And that's had a huge boom. But being like a fantasy lover anyway and kind of gravitating towards that, it's just the timing has also worked out so well. So like genuinely getting to like read romantasy books at my desk, or fantasy, or horror, or whatever, and getting paid to do that essentially is quite amazing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So agent's assistant through to like on associate agent to through to literary agent, that's quite a well-trodden route for becoming an agent. Did you, at what point in from you first starting as a agent's assistant, did you start building your list? Was it as soon as you became an assistant, or was it once you became an associate?
No, so when I was an assistant, which was because I was obviously working for two kind of very busy agents, that was very much the focus. And I think, like most assistants, you have to start with doing the diary, which as a kind of more type B person, I wasn't very good at. But that's kind of part of the process generally. But no, I mean, those kind of first maybe like kind of 3 years specifically, it was very much like focused on, the agent I was working for, like their authors. But also that goes to say, like, I was working with people like David Nichols, Alif Shafak, like worked on Bono's memoir, had worked on like Jojo Moyes. Like, that is so incredible to have been able to kind of, learn about the industry through working with such incredibly talented authors, and kind of also seeing how both like Johnny and Sheila agented them. I think that's given me such an amazing kind of grounding in like how I'm approaching agenting my authors now. But yeah, it was more so when just before becoming an associate agent and kind of having expressed interest of, what genre I might want to do. And I think it was just after COVID. I think it might have been 2021, 2022. And I've always loved fantasy, and had been lucky enough, obviously, on Johnny's list to work with the wonderful Susanna Clarke, and kind of see Piranesi like pop into his inbox one afternoon when we were in the office, and kind of see it. Obviously, Bloomsbury did such an excellent job publishing it. It won the Women's Prize. Susanna Clarke's also just such a delightful author to work with. Like, that was amazing. And then I think I'd always loved fantasy, and I was like, I think I would love to try and kind of carve out a bit of a space in that, because there was people obviously doing more kind of SFF here at Curtis Brown, and also like C&W. But at the time it was more so like, I think kind of like psychological thriller, kind of upmarket book club fiction was like the kind of thing. So it was a little bit more quiet. But like I said, I think with thanks to like kind of, I suppose, Book Talk and the explosion of that, like has really kind of made the genre, like, I think everybody's kind of standing up to attention to it now, which is great to see.
Yeah, it sounds like the stars kind of aligned at exactly the right time for what you like.
Yes, my guardian angel was like of publishing was looking out for me.
And my understanding with that, with your kind of career path, is that you're the agent's assistant. At some point, you'll start building your list, probably while you're still doing some assistant work.
Yes.
When you became official literary agent in March this year, is that when the kind of crossover of you doing some of your own agenting and then also assisting kind of comes to an end, and you're fully just doing your own agenting? Is that the kind of point? So
it kind of, I think it works differently, like agency to agency, and I think probably everyone you've had on this podcast who either works as an agent or an editor could attest to the fact that you're kind of doing that job like 2 years essentially before you get the title.
Yeah.
But for me, like, I still work on a few of Johnny's authors, kind of like Alif Shafak, David Nichols, kind of the bigger machines, if you will, of publishing. And he also has a wonderful assistant, Natalie, who helps out as well. So it's more of a kind of team effort on them. So maybe I do a third of my time on that, and kind of 2/3 of my time on my own list. But it kind of depends as well in terms of, right now, as we're recording this, it's like October, so ahead of the Frankfurt Book Fair, it's very busy. So sometimes those authors require more attention. But I think I've got a good balance of having enough breathing room to like properly carve out time to kind of find my own authors and find new opportunities.
Okay, that lines up with kind of, it's a very organic role and an industry literary agency. Like,
yeah,
it's, you do what you need to do, right?
Yeah, and also, I mean, like, being very transparent, it's a business. So,
Yeah.
you know, you have to be making a certain amount of commission, I think, to kind of sustain a full list, which obviously I'm kind of still more in the earlier stages. So eventually I'll get there, and I'm sure that will be on the horizon someday. But I think it's also lovely to still be able to work as part of a team, because I think sometimes agenting is quite solitary in kind of maybe a similar way to as an author is writing their book. And I actually prefer being able to like discuss ideas with people, have a bit more of that kind of conversation. So I think it's a nice balance.
Okay. In terms of, I know what you mean in terms of it's strange because it's solitary, but at the same time, there's a lot of FaceTime with other people. But do you guys, I know some agencies will have like round tables when they'll all come together with the sort of different queries they've received that they like and kind of show everyone the things that they're thinking about taking on. Is that the kind of thing you guys do at Curtis Brown, or is it more independent?
It's more independent, I think, because we're such a big department. It would be hard to actually find all the times that align for everybody.
Right, yeah.
We do obviously have like our department meetings where we talk about, things going on in publishing, or like we have like a Frankfurt pitch meeting coming up where we'll all pitch the books that, we have out at the moment, which is obviously very fun. But no, I think a lot of the time you're kind of left, they trust your judgment to kind of decide what you think will work well. And I mean, obviously, like with every agent, sometimes that works really well, or there's projects that I've taken on that I still believe in that unfortunately haven't sold and you have to regroup. So it is more of a, independent, opinion, I suppose. But I like kind of having the trust to be able to just kind of go and do what I think is right, or, take on things that I'm just feeling excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. I understand that. Like I said, yeah, it's a independent yet also lots of very forward-facing role.
And I mean, we have a great office, and like, we're in a lot of the time, and there's a lot of people around to kind of get advice from and stuff, which is, so valuable.
Something I think people often worry about, because it can be stressful for an author who's querying agents to think like, am I sending this to the right person? Am I getting things right in my cover letter? I'm going to assume that you guys do this, but just to make sure, if you receive a query and you read it and you're like, this is good, but it's not for me, but I think this could be good for one of my colleagues, you guys will share
pass it
that
along.
kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Sometimes I think there's obviously, we have our bios on the Curtis Brown website, but there can be like conflicting information online. So sometimes I'll get through like some really great pitches for literary fiction, which I don't really do, but would happily pass that on to another agent who I think it would be a good fit for.
Okay, yeah. Because I've I've spoken to agents on this podcast and sort of mentioned something that's on their website, and they're sort of a bit horrified, and they're like, "Oh, I haven't updated that in a year or something."
Yeah, I know the bio. I'm like, I should really update mine, but I think the right people do find me, and I think other agencies we're a bit different here. I think we all get our submissions direct to like either our emails or our own submission boxes, as opposed to kind of centralized submission inbox. So I'm very much seeing them, like I get them direct into my email. Cover letters come in quick succession, and I'm normally I think pretty good at passing along ones if they're not for me.
Okay, right. Do you use Query Tracker as well?
I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm sure I'm possibly on there, but I don't really check it.
Okay, so not advisable if anyone.
No, I think just email me, and that's the best way to get a hold of me.
Okay, great. So let's talk about the list itself. In a broad sense, what are the genres and the age ranges that you represent?
Yeah. So, I mean, broadly speaking, every agent I think maybe has their speciality, but like to me, a lot of the time it does come down to like great pitch, character, voice, and I feel like sometimes that can transcend genre. So in a way, apart from like super literary experimental fiction or like very kind of like military history nonfiction, I'm pretty much open to anything if like I enjoy the pitch. But kind of being a bit more selective as kind of the list grows, I'm definitely trying to like build up the kind of SFF and horror kind of side of the list here at Curtis Brown. And my particular, passion, I suppose, is more so the fantasy space and kind of anything that falls under that. But I think, we're seeing a lot more of like genre blends now. Obviously, romantasy is a blend of fantasy and romance, but like kind of fantasy and horror and stuff. So anything kind of weird and wonderful in that space, I would love to see. But I'm also a huge fan of kind of more like commercial nonfiction and like personal development, and that kind of stuff. And sometimes it's nice, obviously, to work on a proposal that's 50 pages instead of a 150,000 word manuscript. So I kind of like a bit of variation. But specifically, like I said, as I've mentioned, book talk and romantasy, like as I was kind of somebody who had engaged with that's, I think, become a bit more of my niche here. So I'm very happy, obviously, to keep kind of finding great authors in that space. And I think it's great to see the amount of submissions that have come in that space. And I think like fantasy having been such kind of a publishing juggernaut now, with all the new imprints cropping up and kind of, I think, like the kind of money that they're pumping into it, it's been a very exciting time to kind of be in that space.
Yes, absolutely. Before, I want to get some more specifics on that, but I think it's also sometimes useful to say, are there any things that you absolutely don't represent?
Never say never, because I think it's funny. Sometimes I will get, obviously submissions in and I don't like the cover letter, but I'll start reading the material and I really enjoy it. So like I say, maybe like not super experimental literary fiction, maybe nothing too depressing, or kind of very serious nonfiction. But I'm very much open to a lot. I think, like I say, for me specifically, like the characters are kind of what I very much kind of gravitate towards in any submissions I do take on. And if they kind of stick with me, like that is an amazing sign. And I wouldn't mind doing, either like crime thriller with an amazing character or kind of book club. I'm on the search specifically, though, if anybody is listening and has this, like my great love story, and I want it to be like utterly devastating. So if anybody has that out there and you think it will make me cry, please do send it. Okay,
great. Because I was going to ask in a second, like, is there anything you're specifically looking for? That's fine. You answered it. If there's one specific thing, it's a sort of epic love story.
Yeah, definitely.
Going back into some of the things that you mentioned just there. So it sounds like, I know that there's fun bits in romantasy, but like sci-fi, horror, for me, those are generally more serious kind of things. Are you open to like comedy and things like that, or do you tend to keep things a bit more thrillery, a bit more intense?
I am open to comedy. I think it has to be more of like a dark humor, I think, for my taste anyway. But I think, as in, I was having a conversation with an editor recently about, like, say, cozy fantasy, for example. Like, I definitely think there's a place for that in the market. But for me as a reader, like, the high stakes and the kind of escapism of that is what I gravitate towards. And I think that's why there's like those genres do so well. So I'm probably more on the like serious side, if you will, or a bit more like life and death rather than, low stakes.
Okay, so more like a sort of Joe Abercrombie kind of dark comedy than like a whimsy kind of Terry Pratchett kind of comedy.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, great. Science, what was it? There's a few agents I've spoken to recently. Romantasy obviously has been like the big thing for a while now, and obviously when a genre is so popular for a long time, it becomes very competitive. There's a lot of people now in that space. Is there? I've heard a few people talking about how they're looking at science fiction romance. There's probably a clever way of gluing those together like romantasy, but
I'm not going to try and do that. Yeah.
We'll wait until someone else does it and then we'll copy it. Is that something that you think could be like coming up alongside romantasy?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think like you say, romantasy has had its big boom, and that's kind of a double-edged sword, because it's obviously great that so many amazing titles are coming out in that space, but it is becoming a lot more competitive and trying to, I think the key is like, what is the point of difference? Like, I've had a lot of submissions this year, and so I've read a lot of cover letters, and I think the problem is everything is starting to feel a little bit similar, and I think that the key is now trying to stand out, and whether that is, you know, obviously like going to a different genre, say like sci-fi. I think it would have to work in a more like fantasy feel though, for the kind of readership that is, you know, the bulk of romantasy. But I definitely think, as you know, as it kind of is sustained, it's also going to grow in terms of like the blending of genres. Like I think a lot of editors I've been talking to kind of want a horror romance, or say like dark fantasy and horror. I'm seeing a lot of in my submissions inbox, but yeah, to me, it's for any authors as well in their cover letters and when they're thinking about that, like, what is the point of difference? Like, is it either kind of a unique world, interesting world building, like a complete kind of like turnaround of a trope, or something like that? I think it's what are you standing out with now? Because I think that classic romantasy is great, and I think there's obviously still going to be space for that. There was people who read it before it was coined as romantasy, and I was one of them. So I don't think it's going away, as much as I feel like I hear a lot in publishing of people being like, romantasy's dead now. And I don't agree with that at all. I think it's just a sustained genre, in the way like psychological thrillers are always going to be a thing. But it's kind of what's the evolution of it now. And I think it is more of like, yes, maybe branching into kind of sci-fi and romance, or horror romance, or kind of blending all three.
Okay, yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think romantasy is a mainstay now of the genre. Like, I mean, you can compare it, if you think back, you can compare it to like the boom of psychological thrillers with like Gone Girl and stuff. And it's like those are absolutely a very popular genre and a mainstay that will never be out of style.
Because even like Frida McFadden has like 5 titles in the Sunday Times bestseller list. Like there's always going to be readers for that. And I think there's always going to be readers for, you know, that very kind of classic commercial romantasy too. But I think in terms of publishing, trying to keep, you know, evolving and growing, we would hope it's thinking of what's next. And I don't think any of us technically know what that will be, but I have a feeling it is just more so like the point of difference and kind of something that does feel fresh.
Yes. Crossing genres is what I'm hearing a lot about. And of all the genres that people are trying to cross with things, horror is the one that seems most popular. And horror romance kind of writes itself.
Yes. So. Yeah. I mean, I think on my bio, like a line about unhinged women doing unhinged things. And that remains for any of that kind of those genres.
Okay. Yeah. Like a Bella Mackie is
or kind of more in the horror space. I think like kind of like that book, such an amazing title, like The Eyes Are the Best Part. Like that was incredible. And kind of that feel, I think I'd love to see.
Okay, that's cool. My last question before we strand you with and ask you for a book is fantasy. You said that you've always been a big fantasy reader. Obviously, we've covered romantasy. You cover that and the sort of the currently commercial kind of popular things. Do you do all sorts of fantasy? Do you also do like epic fantasy or fantasy realism?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm very open to it all. And like growing up, I read a lot of kind of classic like Robin Hobb or, you know, George R. Martin. So I'm very open to seeing, you know, not romantasy essentially. To me, like I say, I think it's anything within that wider genre. If it is like the characters are great or that there's something fresh about it, I'm not too beholden to very specific, you know, romantasy, or like it has to have a romance plot. And I think, you know, things like Piranesi, Susanna Clarke, or, you know, Jonathan Strange or Miss Cinderella, like those are incredible and epic, and the writing is like of such a brilliant quality. And I mean, obviously I would love to find my own Susanna Clarke, but not that I think she'll ever be replicated, but something in that vein also would be incredible, and like kind of more literary fantasy even. Okay,
cool. Yeah, that's good to know. And that brings us to the point in the episode where I would normally strand you on a desert island, but this will be the 250th episode. So I thought, after several discussions recently with guests who have come on and said they've sort of alluded to the fact that they picked something based on they were picturing themselves on a desert island. So I thought 250 episodes, let's change it up a bit. So the question for now, for a while, will be, Ciara, if you were snowed in at a cozy woodland cabin in the middle of nowhere, what book would you hope to have with you?
Well, that's a much nicer setting, so I'm sorry to everyone who's come before me, stranded on a desert island. It would have to be not a fantasy book, actually, but Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell.
Okay, yeah.
I absolutely adore that book. I read it during the first lockdown during COVID, so it has a special place in my heart of like managing to completely distract me from the impending doom of what was happening. And the writing is just so beautiful. And I think as well, the fact, I don't know if this is 100% true, but I think it is, I'm 99% sure, that all the words and the word choices she used were of like, none of the language was kind of coming after the time of Shakespeare. So it felt very authentic in terms of like it being historical. But I just think like, in terms of world building specifically, and world building doesn't just apply to like fantasy. It was so immersive. The writing is just so lyrical, and yeah, I thought it was beautiful. It made me like, obviously any books that make me cry are ones that I enjoy. And I'm so excited. Obviously, you know, there was a stage adaptation, there's a film adaptation coming out. It's just really beautiful. So if anybody hasn't read it, I would highly recommend it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those instances where it's popular because it's so good.
Yeah.
You know, I think we can often fall into the trap of being like, oh, it's so popular, you know, I can't be bothered, or, you know, whatever. But sometimes things are popular for a reason. And Hamlet was, it was quite the sensation when it came out. Yeah.
And I think as well, like when a book is easy to read, like that is a good thing, because I think the author, that's actually a very hard skill, I think, to acquire as a writer. But when you're just like can completely trust the writer's taking you on this journey, and it feels so easy to just immerse yourself in the story, like that is what makes something like that so compelling, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great choice. And the first book at the cozy woodland cabin.
Let me just stay there, actually.
Sure. Coming up, we are going to get into more about query letters, cover letters, a deeper look at how Ciara, what Ciara is looking for within all of that. That will be in the extended episode, which you can find at patreon.com/rightandwrong.
Yeah, I think like authors who are kind of, you know, earning out their contracts and making royalties, like that's incredible. And I think, you know, publishers to then recontract you will look upon that very favorably.
Yeah, because on the books, you're now a profitable author, whereas someone who got a huge advance, it might take like another 5 years for that to actually become profitable. If it does.
If it does, yeah.
It's a complicated industry, and it's always changing. But we're at the end of the episode. Thank you so much, Ciara, for coming on the podcast, chatting with me, telling us all about your kind of journey through publishing, everything you've been up to, and kind of your way of tackling query letters and all of that chaos that's in there. It's been awesome chatting with you.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed our conversation, and hopefully some of the things I've said will help some people out there.
Yes, I'm sure they will. And for everyone listening, if you want to keep up with what Ciara is doing, you can find her on Instagram at Ciara Finan _lit agent. And if you want to submit to Ciara or anyone else at the Curtis Brown agenting team, head over to curtisbrown.co.uk, go to the book section, and then go to the team section, and you'll be able to see the list of all of the agents, including Ciara. And within each of those, there is in-depth descriptions of what they're looking for, what they like, what's on their list, etc., etc. And that's it. So to support this podcast, like, follow, and subscribe. Join the Patreon for ad-free extended episodes, and check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks, Ciara, and thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode.